Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. I feel like it's been a really long time since I've given a talk here. I don't know if it has, I just feel like it has. People come to begin or take up a meditation practice like this for a lot of different reasons. In the Zen tradition, we call this form of practice that we engage in Zazen, which is a Japanese phonetical rendering of a Sanskrit term, jhana. We translate this into English as meditation, but it's really a terrible translation. Meditation means to take up a thought and to sort of cogitate on it, to think about something. And Zazen, this practice that we engage in, is anything but that. So the closest word that I've come up with is dissolution. Although recently another word is really working for me, which is compost. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why. There was a Zen master he started teaching in around 1230 in Japan. His name is Dogen. And he, in a talk he gave called Bendoa, gave this formula that's been quoted many times in Zen. And it starts with this equation that to study Zen is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to meet awakening in the 10,000 things, or in everything. To meet awakening in everything. Now, some of us come to practice because our blood pressure is too high. Some of us come to practice because we have difficulty sleeping at night. Some people come to meditation practice because they want to improve their focus and their productivity at work, essentially because they want to make more money. They're all reasonable reasons to come to meditation practice. And in my experience, meditation practice works for all of that stuff. But it's sneaky. And you've really got to watch it, because if that's what you're coming for, in some ways I think it's like coming to heroin for relaxation. Zazen, this dissolution practice, is strong medicine, and it works every time. So we sit down and our intention is to relax. But what we're doing always in Zen practice is bringing our mind and our body into stillness. What we're doing when we do Zen practice is allowing our awareness and attention to collect, to gather. In our day-to-day lives, our awareness and our mental energy and our emotional energy is dispersed in 1,000 different directions. It goes out of our eyes and out of our ears and out of our mouths and out of every pore in our body in this busy world. We have a million opportunities to not be aware, attentive, considerate of what's going on in our mind and in our body in this moment that we're living, scattered in a million different directions. But the solution or a remedy for this is simply to sit. As we settle down in our body and in our minds, we have almost no choice but to become aware of what's going on inside of our heads and inside of our hearts. And at first, when we first take up this posture, when we first take up this practice, this me, this self, this identity that I have, that I hang on to, that I look out from into this world, that I experience and judge and discriminate everything that I come across this perspective from, it's a chunk. It's like a solid mass. And when I sit with that, I feel all of the tensions and all of the anxieties and all of the concerns that are associated with that one solid chunk. And as I sit still, I can become more and more aware of how this chunk is associated with all of these feelings. These feelings of things that I want to bring closer to that chunk. And the things that I want to avoid having anything to do with because they make my chunk uncomfortable. And how everything in my life is geared towards pursuing and collecting things that make my chunk feel safer and more stable and more solid. And the other big part of my life is trying to get rid of and avoid stuff that makes my chunk feel fragile and vulnerable and fragile and vulnerable. I think that's good. So Buddhism, we come across this Dharma, this teaching in Zen, and it posits this one idea, and it says that chunk that you're hanging on to, that chunk that you spend so much time protecting and trying to build up and trying to avoid breaking apart, it's not real. There's nothing permanent about it. There's nothing fixed about it. There's nothing solid about it. There's nothing lasting about it. And certainly, there's nothing separate from anything else about it. The Dharma says that's just a thought you might want to consider as you're sitting there adoring your chunk. And as we sit, we sort of, in the stability, the stillness, and the quiet of our sitting, as our mind and body come to rest, we have this opportunity to kind of turn this chunk over, to turn this thing that we call the I am, the me self, over. And as we do, we start to come to know it first. We start to come to recognize how we make relationship with things. We start to become more and more aware of the things we like and that we don't like. We become more and more aware of the choices that we make on a day-to-day and moment-to-moment basis because of a decision that we hang on to, that I'm this kind of person or I'm that kind of person. And when we sort of chase that back and try to find out where does that come from, we can follow it back and we can follow it back. And eventually we find that these choices and these decisions and these conclusions and these preferences, they're based on nothing. It was just a choice. It was just a habit. It was just a conditioned response that we were taught by our parents, or that we improvised in a difficult circumstance and it seemed to work. So we had no further need to improvise further. We had no further need to explore further. We just run the pattern because it worked last time. And when we do that we fixate, we get attached, we connect with that. And as we continue to sit, we begin to see that it's not just the beneficial things that we get when we make choices, when we attach to habits, when we run a pattern. There are difficult things that arise. There are uncomfortable and unpleasant things that arise. Sometimes something that worked the first time really has stopped working, but we keep running the pattern because that's who we are. That's who I am. That's what I do. And as we continue to sit, and as we continue to allow this chunk to turn over in the spaciousness of our heart and of our mind, we begin to see space. We begin to see cracks. We begin to see fissures and openings in what we took as a solid block of I, who I am. We start to see that this thing that we call I is just a conglomeration of habits and conditioning and choices and desires and avoidances, anxieties and fears that all come together in this mass. And when we begin to investigate, we say, well, where is the me part of this conglomeration? We really have a hard time finding an isolatable, individual, separable thing that we can hold up and say, oh, there's the real me. And what starts to happen is the spaciousness between these habits, between these conglomerate patterns begins to open up. The block, the chunk, starts to melt. Or as I was suggesting earlier, it starts to compost a little bit. The rigid edges around things start to melt away, break up, break down. And in this space, in these spaces in between, we begin to become more and more aware of something else. Something other than just this stuff, this collection of things that we've called ourselves. We begin to become aware of a spaciousness which is present all around us, and which is present in each of our choices, and which is present in every aspect of this thing that we call ourself. Now, a lot of people come to Zen because they realize they're having a hard time. They're suffering because of this thing that we call a self. And they hear Zen says that there is no self. Gosh, I'd really love to dump this thing called a self. So we come to Zen and we try to get rid of this thing that we call a self. We try to crumple it up in a ball and throw it away. But there's another side. Yeah, of course. We need to open up these spaces, create these gaps, open up this possibility, this something else which is beyond the self. We need to dissolve and compost and break apart and immerse ourselves in this spaciousness. Shunyata, emptiness is called in Buddhism. Emptiness not as in a void, but as a formless capacity, an infinite but formless capacity. But we can't stay there. Each of us has a body, and each of us has parents, and each of us has teachers, and each of us has schools, and each of us has relationships and habits. And in practice and in every aspect of our lives, we have to become more and more aware of both of these aspects. Realizing that this conglomerate glob, this chunk that I call me, isn't all there is to me, isn't all there is to this world, this cosmos. There is a capacity that is limitless, boundless. And there is also this body, these relationships, this environment, this earth. In our Zazen practice, this practice of dissolution, we don't come looking for a final solution. We don't come looking for the day that we can be done and dust off our hands and go be enlightened people and, have a beer on the patio as a Buddha. Our practice is simply to return day in and day out, manifesting this practice of dissolving away, allowing the rigidness, the hardness, the stuckness to melt, to dissolve, to completely immerse ourselves in the formless fabric of this cosmos. And then, when the bell rings, we bow and we are born anew. A new self arises with the capacity to make different choices, with the capacity to take up different preferences, to begin new habits, and to allow old ones to drop away. This is the foundation of Zazen, the foundation of Zen practice. So maybe we came to sleep better at night. Maybe we came to reduce our blood pressure or make more money at work. Who knows? But if we keep engaging in this practice of Zazen, allowing this self to dissolve, to drop away, I think it's really a wonderful adventure. And I always like to give a little bit of caution, because I can't even say be careful or you might lose yourself. Certainly, if you continue to engage in practice, it is my hope that you will. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.